Hello friends and everyone, welcome back again to Netcode-Hub channel. We are still working on our employee management system, and this is going to be the part 2 of the series that we have started. So in the first video, we were able to create the database models, employee models, and also branches departments and general department and etc. So in this video, we are going to continue and create our authentication system to this. Now, this application is going to handle from administrator to managers and to employees. So it's going to have this hierarchy of rows. So it means you have to create a table that can handle the rows as well. So quickly, let's go to this. Let's clear first what we have in here. Now, the next thing to do here is we go to the base library, which contains the models. And you can see we have these entities. So all models in this area is going to be kept in a database. It means that you're going to have a table representation of all these models here. We need a table to handle rows. So first of all, since we are not using Identity Manager, we have to create our own or customized Identity Manager for ourselves. So let's quickly create a class. And on the class here, I'm going to name it as System Rows. So this system rows is going to have only ID and our name. So we have system rows ID and name. So we have this. We can just remove this and make this as public. So it means you're going to have an ID, administrator or user, any other row that the administrator want to add and assign people to. It's possible here. Now let's save this, and we also have to create a table that's going to handle user row. As soon as you assign a user to a row, it must be updated or kept. So anytime that we are generating the token, we can come in there and now fetch the user row and use it. So we can create a class to handle that. So here we need an ID, we need a row ID, and also we need user ID. So these are the two tables that we need. Now, when we are done here, we have to go to our server library, and this is going to be the data access layer. Now, that data access layer, you can see we have this app.db context, and that is the name that I have given to it as server library. It is a data access layer because it gets interacted with the database, and I retrieve data and do a lot of stuff as well. So within the app.db context, we need to also create another 2 rows here. Is it 2 rows or 2 tables? So let's create 2 tables. So we have them in here. So system rows and our user row. Now each is deriving from the respective model that we created. Okay, so we have this. All right, so we are done with the models here. We can now save this. But before we continue, if you haven't subscribed, you make sure you do that as well. And if you want to support this project as well and want to buy me coffee, you can do that. Check the video description and the link is over there. You can also like this video and to also support this video as well. Okay, so let's move on. Now we have our models here created. We now have to create our repository, which comprises of an interface and an implementation. Now this is going to happen in the server library. That's going to create our repository in. So let's go to the contract, and as you can see from the repository, we have a contract and implementation. So in the contract, we're going to handle all the implementations or all the interfaces. We create a new interface and I rename it as iUser account. So this iUser account, you want to have 2 methods for user registration and also for user login. So we have this public, and we have to create a responses here. And we know we have this model that we need to add from this base library from the DTO. We have this. So let's see if we can add a to this base. Now, when you go to the base library, you can see from here we have this DTO, and that's where we have this register. So within this, we can right click on dependencies and add project reference. We need to add this base library, and it has been added already. So click on OK. And now once you're done, control period, we can include the namespace of this. So let's see. So in here, we have to include a namespace for this. That is from the base libraries.dtos. This is the folder that we are looking. And also we need to create these responses. We have the general responses and also login responses. So in order to do that, we have to create a folder and I'll name it as responses. We have it already. So we're going to create models. The first model is going to be general responses model. And this is going to be a record. So right click on the responses. Let's add a new class. And I will say general response. So in here, we are going to have this as a response. So let me just paste it here. We have general response and it's a flag and it's a message. You can now save that. So from that, we need to also create login response, which is going to handle token and the refresh token in case everything work. We want to handle that. So you have to also create one model for that, and you're going to name it as login response. And now in this model, we want to have a message. We want to have this a flag, a message, token, and a refresh token. So that is what you want to have for this response. Now let's remove this. Okay, so that's what we have. Now let's go to the interface, and now we can add this to the response, and now this is done. We need to also create the implementation, and you can see we have this folder in here. So you're going to make it as user account repository, and let's quickly create a class and I'll handle that in there. So right click. Now let's add a class in here, and it's going to be user account repository. Now within that, it has to inherit from the interface that we created, so our user account, and we have to implement the interface in here. So when you check our app.setting.json from the server section, you know, we have our JWT section in there, and we have to specify it here. So we have our connection. The next thing here is we need to specify our JWT, and this is the audience, the key, and also the issuer. These are the sections that we're going to be using for our token generation. So we have to put them here. So here I'm going to paste this here. So you can see we have this JWT section, and this is our key. So you can have a random key, minimum is 16, and have to get an issuer and the audience. So you know the issuer is going to be here we set the issuer and the audience to the same API address. If you want to have the port, you go to the server, go to properties, line settings, and you're going to have the port in here. From where we have this HTTPS, we have the port as 7294. Can just grab that, go back again, and now change this. Good. So we have a key in here, and we have our issuer and the audience. Now in .NET 8, there is an I option which can be used to map this, and this is a strong type. It means that when you make even an error here, it's going to alert you to rectify before the application can run. And so let's try to use that. There's a new one in the .NET 8. So let's see if we can integrate that. So in order to do that, we have to create a folder, and now to this server library, that's going to be data access. We can just right click on this, create another folder here, and I'll name it as helpers, or let's say helpers. Now within this helper folder, we also need to create a class here, and now let's name the class to the name of the section here as JWT section. So right click on this, let's add a class, JWT section, and now in that we need to specify properties that we have in the app.setting.json. So let's make here as nullable. So when you check this app setting, you can see we have key, issuer, and our audience. We want to map it, so we must have the same name in here. So we go to the program.cs file from the server section. And now in here, we are going to map this. So we can do that from here. And we're going to say that builder.services.configure, then JWT session. This is a module that we created. We want to get a session name as JWT session, and I'll map the key and our its value to the property that we have here respectively. All right, so once we've done this, we can now be using this anywhere in our models or in our classes that are going to be created. Let's have a look at the next one, and what we're going to talk about here is going to be the interface implementation for the user repository. So let me close the rest. So save this. Okay, so let's open the implementation again. So yeah, what I'm going to do here is we are going to inject it in here and I'll start using it. And it is not only the JWT section module that's what we are going to inject. We also need to inject AppDB context class as well. Now, with the help of C# version 12, you know what you call as primary constructors. So I'm going to inject them here. Very simple one. Okay, so let me just, okay, so very simple one. Now control period, I can just remove this and I just show you using in here. So you can see I'm using this I options and I pass in the JWT section in here and I create an instance of it. So anytime that I call this, I'm going to have access to the keys which I have in the accessing.json value. So let's see, first of all, we're going to create an account. So you know we've injected AppDB context, but let's have a look first. So when this register model is null, maybe you want to return something because it is a best practice to always check if model is null before you even make any operation. So we check if it is null, then you want to return. But in case it is not, you want to find out and check if the email already exists. So in order to do that, we create a method that is a find email or find user by email. Now in that method, we can specify a very simple method which is going to handle that for us. So I'll put it down here, and it is application user. It's going to return an application user. So we're going to look through the database as an application user and I'll search for email and I'll return. So we are saying that if it's not equal to null, I mean, person is registered already, you want to return that. But if in case the person has registered or the person hasn't registered, then what are we going to do? We want to now save the user. So how do we save the user? We have to create an instance of this application user and we need to populate it. The property that it has, we need to specify models values to it. Here we need to specify application full name. So let's make some edit in there. We go to the application itself from the base library where we have this entity, application user, and here we can make it as full name. I thought I copied that. I did not. So we can make this as full name. Definitely we are going to apply migration, so don't worry. And we are, you can see, we create email, full name, email, and password. And the password, we are using this bcrypt to hash the password. And now we create this method as add to database. So this method is going to handle this model and I'll add it to the database and I'll save it. And it can also return the entity. So let's create that method down here. So what we have this method is going to save the data and it is a tax of T. So it means you can pass in any model to create a generic class that we are creating. So we add it to the database and I receive changes and I return entity of this tax of T. So once you come here, this is solved. So we add it to the database and after we are done adding, the thing that we're going to do here is we're going to check and assign rows. So how do you check and assign row? Let's see. The first person to register an application here, you want to check, create an admin role and assign it to that person. And this application is going to handle one administrator initially. So the first person to register is going to be an admin. The rest are going to be user. As administrator, you can assign another roles to people, maybe when we are done. Okay, so this is going to be the default one. And later on, the admin can assign multiple roles and even change the role of a user in here. That's going to be identity manager. I'm going to handle that as well. Okay, so here, in order to save the admin test and also the user test, we have to create as a constant. So you're not passing raw or raw string in here. Maybe we might have it in a wrong way. Okay, so it's better that we create a class. And on this class, let's make this as constant. So we can just go to this place where we have our helper folder. We can just right click on add this, make it as constant. Okay, so this is going to handle all our constant properties. And in here, we want to have our static method for this. We have our admin and our user for admin user. So anytime that we need admin user, we are not going to type it. Maybe you can type it and make it as lowercase as a, and in that case, it's going to have an error in it. Okay, if you do not ignore case. So it's better that you put it in a constant like this. Anytime that you want, you can call this and the value remains the same. Let's save that, and we are checking from here that if we have an admin row, then skip it. In case you do not, then create an admin row and the current person assign a person to an admin row. Okay, so we call the same at the database method, which is going to add the data and return the entity. And now we assign the row ID to the return entity in here. The user ID is the return type, and then the row ID is also the return entity. Remember that here we are creating admin row, and this is going to return an entity, so we can have an ID here. And now this user ID also going to return an entity when you call this add to database. So the application user, we can also have the current user ID in here. The reason why we are having this underline is we did not make this as public or static class. So this must be a static because we do not want to create multiple instances. Create it once and now start using it everywhere. Okay, so this must, okay, so it's saying that it's an ambiguous reference between the helper constant and the Visual Basic constant. Okay, so maybe we can include a namespace for this control period. We're not using this. We want to use a server constant. Okay, so that's all you want to use. All right, so we have it stored in here. Control period, you can remove necessary ones. Okay, so once you're doing that, this is going to store the admin. But in case an admin row has been created already, meaning admin has been registered, then you know what you're going to do. We are going to check and add the user. So admin is registered, check. If user is not created, create it and add a person. If the user also created already, then add a person to it. So we see we have find the system row and check if you have user in there. If row it is null, then add it. So here we have to add the user, not the admin. Okay, so constant.user, we add the user, and now also we also assign the row over here, the row ID, and we have the user ID as well. So it's the same thing that we are also running from the user row. Aside from that, we have to add it to the database, meaning if the user if the user row is created already, then add a person. Do not create. So it's going to skip this. It's not going to create a row again. It's going to skip it and now add the user here and assign the row. Return account created. The very simple one. So this is what we are doing. Now we can save this. And what we're going to do here is let's register this in the program.cs file by creating dependency injection in this. So program.cs file. And now let's register this here. So after registering this in here, we need to control period. Let's see if we can include this user account repository. It is coming from this server library, that's the data access layer. So if I right click on the dependencies, let's see if we've added that package reference, base server library. Okay, so let's include it here. So using server library dot repositories. Okay, so let's see user account. Let's check the name in here. The user account repository, that is the name that you created, is inheriting from this user account repository. So we can copy this, we check it in here. Let's paste it here. And now what is this saying? This cannot be found. So let's see why it is not found. We need a repository in here, dot. So dot implementations. Okay, so we have the implementations, and that is where this model is found. Now, when you check here, there's going to be an internal, so we need to make this as public, so it can be accessed globally. And this is supposed to, yes, so we have it set. Now, let's create a controller to handle this. So let's quickly go to solution. Now, in the controller, let's open this, right click, let's add a new one. And there's going to be an API, empty controller. And now with this, we're going to name this as an authentication controller. So here, let me just paste this. Now with this authentication controller, we want to inject the interface contract as a primary constructor. And in that, for the registration, we want to create one endpoint, and I name it as registration. And you can see we pass this the payload. We call the account server.create async, and I return the response. So once we have this, let's save this, build this again, and I perform migration to get the table to the models that I recently created. Then we run the application and test the registration or the account session. So this is done. Let's add a database. So let's add migration to this. So say add-migration. Let's do it again. Add-migration. So add rows. Let's say that's going to be the name. Let's choose the server library, that's the data access layer. Let's run it. While this has finished running, we are going to update the database. So this is also done. As you can see from here, it is done. So we can now run this application and now see what we have now. Okay, so the API is ready. Now let's click on register, and I'll try to create an account in here. So let's maintain what we have, user@example.com, and then the password is the same. We have full name as string as well, and confirm password to the same. So you can see we have to arrange it well, but let's say when you're working with the UI, we can arrange them well in the based on the form that you're going to create. All right, so once you have this, we are going to execute this. The first person to register the app, it is it is this one. So here we must have a role as an administrator, as an admin role. And let's see, so you can see from here that account created. Let's add one more, so user one, and this has to be assigned with a user role. So this account created, let's say this is the same thing. If I click on execute, you must have user registered already. And maybe we can specify 2. Let's say execute it, and our account created. If I click on it again, user registered already. So the user cannot register with the same email twice. Let's go to the database and now check and see if it has been added in here. So this is going to be the application user. If I refresh this, you must have 3 records now, and that's what we have in here: user 1, and user 2. These are the respective password that it has been created for us using the bcrypt. Aside from that, when you check the system roles, 2 roles has to be created: admin and our user. Admin is 1 and our user is 2. When you go to user role, when you refresh it, you must have roles assigned to the various users. So you can see ID 1. Row 1, that's the user 1. So row 1 is administrator, user 1 is the user. Now row ID 2 is a user. Right, row 1 is an admin. Now row ID of 2 is a user. User ID of 2, it is a user, and also user 1 and a user 2. So only one person has been assigned as admin. The rest have been assigned as what? Row ID of 2, and that is the user row. Good, so this is working. Now let's handle the login. So that's not a person logs in. We can now check, verify, and now generate token, and so add a reference token to it. Let's go to the interface and I'll add one more. We have it already, so we go quickly to the implementation. Let's see. There's a create async, and now here's a sign in async. So let's handle this. So in here, the first thing that we do is we check if it is null, then return. This must be an async, I believe. Remember that. Aside from that, we're going to find the user and see if the user's email is found in the database. If it is found, then we want to continue. But in case it is not, then we want to return user not found. In case it is found, we want to verify the user's password that is coming in. Take note that we have the password already, so we want to check it using the same bcrypt.net. They want to verify the password. We're passing the current password now, the database password. And this password is going to be possible as soon as the user is found in here. We can retrieve the person's password. In case they do not match, that is when it returns false. It means they do not match. We want to return email or password not valid. In case it is valid, we want to get the row. So get the user row from the user row table. Aside from getting the row, we want to get the row name. You know, user row has only the row ID and the user ID. So once you have the user ID in there, you can retrieve the row and now you can find the row name from the system row in here. Once you do that, you can now generate a token and also generate a refresh token by passing in the application user object that we have. And also we can pass in the row to get it created. So we call two methods generate token. You pass in this application user, which is an instance of this app user. We have this row name also as well. So we are adding these two properties as a payload. Then we can now generate it. And this is returning a string. This is also returning a string. And I can see from here, we return a login response, whereby I specify the JWT token and also the refresh token in here. Let's generate the two method. So what we're going to do here is, first, we're going to create a method to generate the token. And as you know already, this is what we've been doing since. We pass the application user and now we get a security key from this config.value.key. I hope you remember now. So you're not using without the configuration, then we pass in the section of the app setting. Rather, I want to use the iOption object that we created. Then we also do same to the issuer. We specify our issuer and also our audience. Okay, these are our claims that we have. We want to send a person's ID, the person's name, email, and our row. So these are the ones that you're going to use to authenticate the user based on the app that the person is registering. If the register registers and the person is administrator, we want to show all features. If the person is the manager or any other user, we want to hide some and now show some. We can do that using this row. So that's what we are adding here. After that, you want to return the token in the form of a string, and that's what this is doing. Now from the refresh token, we're going to generate random numbers, convert to a 64 string, and now return. So in order to do that, just one line of code is going to help us handle this peacefully without having any issue with it. So you can see we use this random number, and this is coming from cryptography. That's security.cryptography. So we have to include that. We get a byte of a 64 string, then we want to return as a refresh token. This is the simple thing that we are doing in here. Let's go to the controller in here and also specify our route in for this login. You go to the controller. The next one here is specify the route. Is it the route, the endpoint? Okay, so it's a login user, and now you can see if it is now returned, but in case it is not, then call this sign-in async interface and also return the user. Let's save this and let's run application again to check it out. So this is also ready. Now let's check this out. If I click on try this out, we have the same user, which is an administrator. Now let's log in. But before we log in, we want to check the row as well. The token that you're going to have, we want to verify from JWT.io to check if this token is valid and what are the claims that this token have. We want to check it up and see. So let's see from this user. Normally we know this is an administrator, isn't it? Now let's click on execute. So we can have the token generated and also our refresh token added as well, which is going to come as a response, as a login, a response. So let's wait patiently for this. Okay, so we have a token ready. You can see we have the flag as true message here, and this is a token. We have a refresh token in here. Let's grab this token from this section. And you know, this is the administrator, we know already because of the email that we created. So let's see from JWT.io. Let's clear this, and now let's paste our own token that we copied. Now let's check it out. You can see we have the name identifier. The ID here, it is 1. The name here, it is was string. Email is user@emailexample.com. Let's come to the claims. You can see we have an admin as a row. This is the expiry date. We're adding 1 day. This is an issuer, and that is an audience. So you can see we have the admin row here. Let's have a look. The next one here, we're going to check for the user and see if this is also going to give us the user or admin row. Let's grab same. Then let's check this out. And now you see this is also user. This is an email, that is a name, and that is an ID. So our authentication system is working. We can generate refresh token. We can also generate our JWT token as well. Okay. So now that you have this working, let's implement the refresh token definition. You know, we have the refresh token key here, but you can do nothing with this key yet. So we have to implement it. Now, there is the overview of this refresh token. When the user logs in, a token and a refresh token will be generated to the user. The user is going to keep it in the local storage or the cookie storage. When a user makes a request and added this token to the header of an HTTP client from the Blazor WebAssembly, the server is going to authenticate the user and now give the user an access. But when the token expires, the server is going to issue 401 status code, meaning unauthorized. When that happens, then the client will send the refresh token to the server. The server takes in the refresh token, verify from the small table that has the refresh token, and check if it is found. Then it calls the token generation method, so the refresh token generation method, to generate a new token and add the refresh token. It updates the refresh token to the table and now send the token to the user. So the server does not save the token. It saves only refresh token, because when the request is coming in, the token has everything that the server needs to authenticate. So it doesn't need to check from any database to make sure it is what he created or not. So it is stateless. So anything that comes in from the client must have all the necessary information that the server will see, get, retrieve, and now authenticate that specific client. I believe this is clear. Now let's have this done. So I'm going to close this, and we have to create a class. That's what we're going to use to handle the token in a small database table. So let's do that in the entities folder. Let's add a new class, and that is a refresh token info. In that, I want to have 3 methods in here. So it's going to be a public, as you know. We're going to have ID, the user ID, and the token. So this is a token, and that is a user ID. This token here, it is not a JWT token, rather it's a refresh token, because it is limited to the refresh token here. Okay, so whilst we have this, what we can do again is, let's save this. Let's go to the AppDB context class, and I'll add the row, a table to the database. So we go to the business layer, and here you can see we have this AppDB context. We are going to, or we have to add method in here. So we can just make a duplicate of this, and I'll change it to this AppDB context. So you can see we have here refresh token info, and now that is a table name. You have 3 properties in here, and that's going to have 3 fields or columns. Let's save this. Now let's create our data transfer object. That's a DTO. So the DTO, we're going to name it as refresh token, and let's do that in the base library. So you come here to the base library, and in here you're going to have our DTO. So right click, let's add a new class to this. It's going to be refresh token. Now in this, you're going to have only 1 property. That is what the user is going to post it anytime the token expires. And this method has to provide the server with the token as a refresh token. So we save that. After doing this, let's go to the iUser account interface. And now in that contract file, we need to add 1 method, and that is known as a refresh token. So it is returning a login response because we're going to return a token and then the refresh token as well. So we pass in this refresh token, which has only one property so far. We save that, we go to the implementation in the user account repository, and in here we have to implement this control period. Let's implement the interface in here. So when you come down here, we have the refresh token here. Now this is what you're going to do. The first time the user creates an account, or the first time the user logs into the account, the refresh token which is going to be generated has to be kept. So we have to go with the edit the sign method and now keep the refresh token which was released the first time the user created an account. Okay. Then later on, when the refresh token is being made, it goes to the database first, get the token, and now update it, and I return the new token to the user. So let's have that done. And to do that, there's a method which has been created in here, and we don't want to repeat it. So you want to extract this method into this statement into a method, so we can be using them. Normally, you can be using them more often. So because you're going to need some of this method in here. So you want to extract this method and then put them here. So put them here. So we have these three methods. The first one here, that is find user row. So this is going to get the user row. Now this is also going to get the user row name. So here you're going to provide only user ID and then to get the specific user, because you know it is making a search from this user row table. And now here we want to find the row name. So the row that we have created, we want to find the name of it. This user row here, this user row comprises of, if I peep this definition, you could say it has only the user row ID and now the user ID. So once you have access to the row ID, we can now go to the row system rows and now find the specific row name. So if I peep on this, you can see we have the row ID and I have the name. So you can now find the name by looping through and now getting this row ID. Okay, so this is what we are doing. Now we can make some slight changes here. Whilst you're making a search out of this to get the row ID, we can just remove it since we have a base class that we can be calling it from. So this is what we can do. From this row name, we can just call find row name, call this method, and that is it. We can also do same to the find user row. So with this, instead of writing this, we've created one base class and we have to use it here. So await find row, we pass an application user in here. So once you've extracted this method out, we can also be using them in here. So in the refresh token, what are we to do, or what are we going to do first? First, you want to check if the module here it is null, then you want to return, because you want to check, maybe it's not going to be null, but let's check first for security sake. Okay, so let's check it. If it is null, then we don't want to even proceed at all. We want to return. In case it is not, or it is not empty, then let's find the refresh token in the token info table. So make a search from the refresh token info table and then get a token which has the same key or ID or the same string as what is coming in. In case it is found, what is the next thing to do? We want to get the user info. So the specific user who has access to this refresh token. And since this table has a token user ID, if we check this token info, it has, let's see, this token info, it has user ID. So we can now make a search from this and now get this user ID. So we get from the application user and find the user ID here. In case this is found, then what are we going to do? We want to now find the row, get the row name, and also call the token and I refresh token again. So you can see that this method, we've created them once and now we are still using them again. That's the best practice so far. Now, aside from that, we need to update we need to now check if the refresh token table contains that specific user info, because as soon as the user logs in, the info must be added there. That's the token or the refresh token. So it's going to make a search from it. In case it is there, then you want to return something like, if it is there, then that's what you want to do. You want to update it and then return, so that we keep the refresh token, we keep the current one and discard the old one. So you can see we are setting the old token to the new one that has been created in here, then save changes. I told you earlier that we are not going to save the JWT. You don't have to save it. The server is stateless, so it doesn't have to save any info about this token before it gets to recognize the specific client. No, it doesn't have to do that. So we don't want to waste our memory or our database storage. So we have to store the refresh token and I return this to the user. Okay, so now that we have this implemented, let's go to our controller and we are going to have our refresh token endpoint. And now there's going to be a post whereby user has to post this to this endpoint, and I'll call this service and try to get a refresh token. So that's what this is doing. And let's save this. And the next thing to do here is we need to add database migration. Now, adding the migration is going to help us add a new table that we have created to the database. So let's first run this. Let's build a solution. So this is done. Let's add migration to this. So down here, I'm going to say that add dash migration. Then I'm going to say add rows. No, add token info table. So let's update the database. So this is done. Now we can now run this application and check it out. So this is ready. You can see we have the refresh token in here. Now if I click on this and try this out, and it is asking a refresh token, passing anything as a refresh token. Let's click on execute. It's going to search through the database table and now find if you could find this. In case you couldn't, it's going to tell you some info in here. So refresh token is required. So it means what you specify, it is not a required token. It is not a valid one. Okay, so let's log in first so we can have access to the token. So click on execute. So this refresh token is not going to be called by the user. It's going to be called by the application itself. So computer to computer communication. That is what this refresh token is going to do. So maybe that's what you can actually do. You can also add date to the refresh token so that at least when there's an incoming of refresh token, you can just check and see if it has expired or not. Okay, if it hasn't expired, you can just return something to the user, and if it has expired, then you call the new token. You can modify it or you can customize it to suit what you want, but this what is going to fit what you're going to do. Okay, so let's maintain this. We have our token, so let's grab our refresh token in here. Now let's call this refresh token endpoint. So let's paste this. And now let's execute this. So now let's check this token. The refresh token ends with DWG, right? Let's see the new one. The new one ends with, so you see, okay, so you have refresh token required. The reason is when you check our code, maybe I believe you saw this already. So let's see, we have a refresh token and token in here. Okay, so we get this. We call this refresh token async. When you go to this user account repository, refresh token async, it comes in here. And now we are going to make a search from this. And now check if token is there, right? So token won't be there because when we are logging in, we did not save it to the database table. So we have to do that. So we can do that from this session when we log in. So let me just minimize this. So here you can see before we return this response to the user, we want to save this refresh token that we have to the database table. Okay, so what are you going to do? So here, first of all, you want to find if the refresh token is found or if the user is found in that refresh token table. Okay, so if the user is found, then we want to check and now update it. So let's see what we're doing. So we are saying that if the user here, it is not null. If the user is found, then we want to update the token to the current refresh token that has been created here. Maybe the user can log in today and now log out the same time, and I'll try to log in at the same time the next day. Some users, as soon as they are done with what they are doing, they want to log out. They don't want to keep their session open. They want to log out. So when they log out, this refresh token is still there. It's not going to be deleted. So when the person tries to log in again, it's not going to check if the user in there already. If the person has a refresh token there, then update it to the new one coming, save changes. But in case it is not, then you want to add a new one. You want to add the current token. If it's the first time of you logging in, you want to add it to the database. Then I return it to the user. So this is what we want to do, or we should have done this to save the info to the table. Now let's see, and now we can run this, and for now, trust me, there won't be any issue here again. Let's check it out. So let's log in here, try this out, and we have this user. So let's execute. So let's check the response. So we have a refresh token, and now let's copy this. Let's go to the refresh token here, and now paste this token. So before that, let's click on execute this, and I see the response. So refresh token is required, that's fine. Now let's paste this, execute this. So let's check this token. You can see we have a token refresh successfully. That is a current token, it ends with ES. The current refresh token ends with EQ. Let's check this old one. This ends with BQ. So the first one, current one, is the EQ, and then this one is BQ. The first token is ES, and I can see this one is 10. So you can see that we have a different token and different refresh token altogether when a request is being sent or made from the client to the server. And that's what the server is doing in here. So this means that we have authentication system done. Both our JWT token and our refresh token plus our rows also has been assigned and now added to the token. So the next one here is going to be trying to consume this into the client section, and that's going to be the Blazor WebAssembly. For now, I'm going to end here, and now the next video we're going to talk about that too. Thank you. If you like what I'm doing, you want to support me, you want to buy me coffee, thank you so much for having that good mind, and maybe you can execute it through a link in the video description. You can also like this video and also subscribe to this channel if you haven't done that.